Oh, good afternoon, Amy. How are you today?
I'm doing great, Tom. How are you? I'm so excited to be revisiting the questions
Yes,
from our audience.
yes, I am too. We've had a great response to our webinar on Who Am I and helping the next gen find their place in the family enterprise. It was about identity. And so what we want to do is another in our series of follow-up, really driven by the questions that people asked. And so today we'd like to focus on the concept of how do we make better decisions together? When the generations come together in a decision-making kind of a process, we find that there's a lot of room for understanding the impact of identity. And so we're going to talk about good process for that. And perhaps setting that up with a story would be useful. We find that we get great feedback that people enjoy kind of the case studies that we bring. Just a reminder, we honor confidentiality, and so these are either anonymized or sort of a conglomerate or used by permission.
Right.
Imagine this, if you will, that you've got what we call a now or leading generation and a next gen, and there can be any number of them, but you're in a room and there's a decision to make, and the question is, how do we make this decision that yields kind of a financial outcome? And there's a lot of issues around this, but how do you do that? And then how does identity get involved? And it's involved significantly, and that's what we're going to talk about today. So that's the brief setup. Imagine a couple generations sitting around a conference room table with a challenging financial decision. And let's go ahead and name it. Let's say there's an opportunity to outsource a department for significant savings. How's that?
I like it. So we're putting this up just to give you a context of what happens when we are making decisions. What are the three parts that go through our brains as we're talking through conversations with our family members or with our business partners or managers? There's always three parts. There's the, how is this conversation making me feel? There's the factual side, or what is happening or what happened. And then there's identity. Of course, we are focusing on identity and how identity impacts this work.
Yeah, do you have a graphic for that? Because you showed me a graphic that I thought was very helpful.
Oh, yes, I do. And I actually thought we were sharing that graphic, but yeah. So
well, I don't see it. So if you could post it up, that would be helpful.
That would be awesome.
While Amy's doing that, you're going to see those three areas that she mentioned. And I think the key to think about is that, yeah, just put it into the slide presentation. I think we'll be there. But you see identity, feelings, and what happened. Folks, really, really stop and remember this simple thing, that if there are two people in the room of different generations, that there's different identity issues, there's different feelings, and there's different definitions of the truth of what happened. And identity drives the feelings, which drives the perception of truth or what happened. That'll be very helpful as we move through our examples. Great slide, Amy.
So we're going to give you some tips about achieving better outcomes together. And Tom, you're going to start with values, right? So what do we mean by values? Why do we need to be paying attention to values?
Well, the key is, values often are, I say this to my clients, they're like a compass through difficult times, whether the difficult times because of leanness or even the difficult times of great success. And so to what extent has the older generation, the now leading generation in the room, been communicating and teaching values to the next gen? We have clients occasionally who haven't gone through a process of understanding and talking about their values, and that is just great work because it's so unifying. So that's something that's very exciting. But if there's common values, then some of the identity begins to become similar, because values can be an identity piece for a family and a business. So if values are in place, that's going to be very helpful. If they're not, let us help you get them in place as soon as possible. I think you'll enjoy the process.
Well, it's not even just getting them in the place. Sometimes we have to think about the fact that they might be in place, but we really haven't taught the next gen how to make it work at work. Like maybe we've taught the values in our family system, but then how do we apply that at work, and how does it resonate in the decisions we're making at work? And I think we have to remember that as well, don't you?
Right. Oh, that's a great point. We do. It's both understanding and teaching.
Right. So the next thing is, what is this decision really about? What are we really talking about? And sometimes it comes out in a topic like financial decisions or laying people off or outsourcing, right? But are we really talking about that? Or are we talking about the identity of each generation and their perspectives on making that decision? And I think if we try to peel that onion and look at it closer, sometimes the surface issue that we say we're talking about is much deeper. And if we go deeper, we can solve the problem. If we stay at the surface, sometimes we just never make a decision because we're not willing to dig deep into what we're really trying to solve. So we help clients do that all the time.
Can I give an example?
Sure, absolutely.
Yeah, I think, first of all, just a technique. It's helpful in a conversation just to say, hey, what's this about? What's really going on here? Not that you're accusing the person of having a hidden agenda, but you want to understand. But here's a simple example that sort of fleshes out the example I started with. So the same two different generations are in the conference room, and they're talking about whether or not to outsource Department X. And the older generation is saying, never have we ever outsourced anything. We are committed to our employees. That's part of what makes the whole business a family. That's part of our soul. If we outsource, we begin to lose the soul. I'm worried about that. And that person's talking about values. Next gen might say, I hear that, I value that, I'm aware of that value. I'm also concerned about our growth value and our strategic plan, and we need capital to do that. And this is an area that we notice many of our competitors are outsourcing. And so I'm concerned about the financial future of the organization and how we move toward the strategic plan of growth that needs capital. And that's, what's this about? Well, it's about two very different things, even in the same decision. And that's where those clarifying questions can help.
Absolutely. And
now, in the midst of that, these patterns and motives that we see, we've got to be careful. Because when I have conversations with a family member with whom I work over a long period of time, I begin to assume that I understand what they're thinking, why they're thinking, and I respond to that. I know why he does that. She always, she never. And my professional advice, as simply as I can state it, is stop that. Please stop that. Stay out of each other's head. Ask clarifying questions. Try to really understand what's going on, and then respond to what you're seeing. Real time.
And when you do the next step, which is what you said, try to understand, you listen for curiosity and you listen for learning instead of listening to form a response.
Yeah.
So active listening instead of loading your gun. That's how I do it, right?
Well said.
In law school, they taught us to load our gun. They taught us to only listen to find holes in the other person's argument or to respond with a shutdown. In all my mediation and the other training, it unbundled that kind of listening. Real problem solving takes listening with curiosity and taking down your walls.
Yes.
So that you can learn. And it shows a ton of respect. And when that's going on, mutual decisions that can be supported from everybody's perspective are created. And that's I think that's the last, but one of the most important things we teach in this work. So Tom, you have anything to add to this question that we started with?
No, I think we wanted to make this one very concise and very practical. So those 4 steps, I think, will guide you well, except I think you have an additional resource, right?
Yes, I do think that there's in our webinar page, we will attach a couple other resources about communications, and one of them is difficult conversations and changing something that's a repetitive rub in subject for you to look at if you want to dig deeper into the 3-circle model.
Well, and just let me, this is unsolicited, but I watched your webinar when you did that, and it's outstanding. And it's clear, understandable, and very practical. I learned from it, used it in my own practice. So well done, Amy.
Thanks, Tom. Thanks, everybody. Have a great day. I hope this helps.
Thank you.